hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so very much for being here today. My name is Eric Sparling, and I'm with the Climate Risk Institute, and I'm hosting the session today together with my colleague Dan Sandink, the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, and my colleague Katharina Lutzen from the Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, or GIZ. And we'll get more of an introduction to GIZ in a little bit here. Together, the Ontario First Nations Technical Services Corporation, we comprise the PIEVC Program Alliance. I want to provide a special welcome to those of you who are joining us today from outside of Canada. At the Climate Risk Institute, we strive to understand and acknowledge longstanding history that has brought us to reside on this land. So today, I just want to acknowledge that I'm in Ottawa, Ontario, on the unceded, surrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, who have lived here since time immemorial. Claire Sanders from the Climate Risk Institute is today's Zoom host, among other things, together with Katrina, kind of the mastermind behind this whole webinar series. So thank you, Claire. And Claire will be available to you if you have any audio or technical issues. You can find her in the Zoom chat function and send a message. You can also send questions about the webinar series itself to her. Today we'll be using Zoom polls, and they will appear on your screen as we go. We hope that you participate. Please also note that we're recording the webinar today, and we'll send out the link to that recording after the webinar, and the link will also be included on the CRI webpage. May I ask that the slide please be advanced? Thanks. Okay, I'll kick off things today by providing a brief overview. I'm sorry, I think I got my, yeah, sorry. So today's the agenda. We'll start with a brief overview of the Practitioners Network. And then I'm going to be handing off to Dan Sandink, and I'll be stepping in a bit too to help an update on the PIEVC program status. And provide a short history of how we got here, and then handing over to Katrina of GIZ, who's going to speak specifically about the international component of the PIEVC program. At that point, we're going to be very pleased to welcome 3 PIEVC practitioners whose images you see here, who kindly agreed to speak to us today and participate as panelists. Those people are Pippa Cookson-Hills, who's climate adaptation specialist with the city of Calgary, Vladimir Naranjo, who is with the Colegio Federado de Ingenieros and Arquitectos, or the regulator of engineering and architecture in Costa Rica. And then finally, Harshan Krishnan is with engineers and geoscientists of British Columbia. So thank you all in advance. What we've done is we've challenged each of these good folks to describe their use of the PIEVC protocol or their involvement with the program in very few slides, as few slides as possible. So they'll have each about a 5-minute spiel. Following their presentations, we're going to have a panel discussion, and then hopefully have time to move into some Q&As as well. Going to be short and sweet, and is intended to give a bit of a taste for what's coming up in the rest of the webinar series. Next slide, please. So with that, on behalf of the PIEVC Program Alliance, I'm pleased to announce the launch of the International PIEVC Practitioners Network. We're launching this through this webinar series, and then kind of culminating in the upcoming global forum, which is currently planned for April 2023 in Vancouver. As many of you, I think, already know, the Public Infrastructure Engineering Vulnerability Committee, a mouthful, so PIEVC for short, protocol was developed to assist engineers in considering the impacts of climate change in the planning, design, operation, and maintenance of infrastructure and buildings. And over the years, since this whole thing began in 2005, the community of PIEVC practitioners is rapidly growing across Canada and increasingly around the world, and practices are evolving. So we hope that the practitioners network is going to create new connections among individuals and organizations and really help to ignite a renewed sense of shared purpose for those whose practice involves planning for and building climate resilient built environments, communities, and economies. So the purpose of the network is for you as practitioners to help advance practice and build on your own practice, sharing your experiences with climate and engineering risk assessment, and by connecting with others, with other experts and peers. Equally, on the PIEVC partnership side, PIEVC Program Alliance side, by facilitating these discussions, we hope to become better informed about reasonable next steps to take with the protocol and how to improve training tools and other resources that practitioners might find helpful. I just pause for a second and say that we would not be able to launch this Global Practitioners Network, especially at this time, were it not for the vision and generosity of GIZ. So a huge thanks to GIZ, and particularly the GIZ CSI, or Climate Services for Infrastructure Investment project, for the financial support, and as you'll hear from Katrina, also the collaboration in the development of this network. Their support will get us through easily the next year of facilitating this network. All right. Insofar as this is a network, it's I think important to start getting to know each other a bit. Since we have, what is the count now? Maybe over 100 people. We can't do it one by one. So we thought we'd use some prepared poll questions. And Claire, if you can put those up at this time, and we'd ask folks to respond. I think we have 4 or 5 of these. Thanks in advance. It's like we have just around 100 folks at least participating.
All right. Oh, still ticking up. All right. All right. I'm going to end the poll.
Thanks, everyone. Take a quick look. All right. So where are you joining from? 80% from Canada. 6% is the next highest, South America, and 5% Europe. All right. So can we do the next, Claire?
Yeah.
I think that captures about everyone. We're up around 110. So 42% on the consulting side. And then
Okay,
probably
share results. There we go.
Probably across the other 3. Sorry, Claire, I didn't realize. So others aren't seeing it at the same time.
Now they are. Now they can see
it. It's like
and our
horse race.
And our panelists can vote. I forgot to enable that feature. So this is just who's attending today.
Great. All right. So about equal parts, more or less, across all government sectors versus on the consulting side, and then some from academia as well. Thanks.
Okay, next one. It's your sector of focus.
Right, water and buildings out ahead in terms of single narrower sectors, although water captures a lot, doesn't it? And then general adaptation planning, nearly 30%, over 30%. All right. Thank you. So there's your sector of focus results.
Okay, and one more.
Didn't see any coastal folks in that one.
Or dams. No, dams are coming, or sluice gates next week with, or next month with Vietnam.
So have you used PIEVC protocol before? Yes, I've used it several or many for many assessments. Used it once. No, I've never used it, but I've taken a course and don't know anything about it. All right. So a fair number to it.
All right, I'm going to end this poll. This is the last one. Share results.
Thanks very much. About half of the folks without prior knowledge.
Okay.
And about half across the rest of the spectrum. All right. Is that the final one, or is there one?
Nope, that was the last one. So we're good to move on.
All right. Well, that's provided a good snapshot. Thanks for that, folks. Thanks for participating. All right. With that, Dan, I think I'll turn it over to you to take us through a bit of the history and current status of the PIEVC program.
Great. Thanks very much, Eric. And thanks, Claire and the CRI team for setting up this event. And it's really great to see such an excellent turnout. Could I have the next slide, please?
Oh, yeah, and at least on my screen, the poll is still showing.
Yeah, not actually, you have the option to close the poll, I believe, if it's still
thanks. Luddite.
So first, I just wanted to start with a very high-level overview of some of the primary characteristics of the PIEVC program, especially given that I saw it was actually, the poll is very helpful to see level of knowledge with the PIEVC program. There's a good contingency here that is not terribly familiar with the program, so hopefully we can address that today. And that's really the purpose. I think part of the main purpose of this webinar is for those who are new to the program to really get a good handle on what the program is and the services that are offered. And by bringing in some of the practitioners, a good idea of how it's actually been applied in the field, both in Canada and internationally. So at a very high level, before we get into any details, the PIEVC process is a structured method for assessing and reporting vulnerability of infrastructure and buildings to climate risks. It's a publicly available free access for public infrastructure in Canada. And we also focus on, in the PIEVC program, publication of assessment reports. So the best way to get a handle on exactly how this works is to go to the PIEVC website, www.pievc.ca. And on the website, we'll outline exactly how to access the protocol and other resources that are available through the program, notably the high-level screening guide, which we'll describe in a minute. And also posted on the website are about 90 completed assessment reports that have been submitted to the PIEVC program for the purposes of publication. And I just wanted to make a quick note, since we have so many people new to the program on the line, that the PIEVC protocol and the high-level screening guide, so that's sort of core current resources that facilitate use of the PIEVC process, are publicly accessible, free for access, notably for Canadian public infrastructure. And we intend to keep it free for access going forward, the PIEVC partnership. And that reflects and respects, number one, the public contribution, the government contribution to development of the program initially, and also the huge and significant volunteer contributions to the program over its life over the past 15 years, from consultants from all levels of government, from NGOs, many hundreds of hours and millions of dollars in in-kind and in volunteer time went into development of the program. And to respect that, we intend to offer these core services for free indefinitely. Another note I wanted to make before we get started is, in getting into detail, is that the PIEVC process, the protocol, is highly accommodating with respect to inputs and is highly scalable. And as we'll outline, I think through the case studies and through the work of GIZ, that the protocol has been applied to both individual infrastructure elements, so things like culverts or a culvert, all the way up to large sets of a portfolio and sets of different types of infrastructure. For example, all types of public infrastructure in very large regions of Canada, for example. And it really all depends on how the infrastructure owners, the project managers, et cetera, want to apply the process. It's very flexible, allows all types or many types of data to be used to conduct these assessments. And two more points are that there is a significant body of Canadian expertise and a large network of users, both nationally and internationally, and a large network of sort of what we call the PIEVC community. I think that's reflected in the attendance and the registrations. Actually, I think we had close to 300 registrants for the webinar today, knowing that not everybody can attend. But we have a very large network of people who are very involved in the program, and a large network of people who we interact with regularly. I think approaching or exceeding 500 individuals currently. And another note is that the PIEVC process, since inception, has increasingly become integrated into policy frameworks, standards, and guidelines, and we'll provide a quick overview of that later on. Next slide, please. So very brief overview of the history of the program. So as Eric mentioned, development of PIEVC, the PIEVC protocol in the program began in 2005, led by Engineers Canada with support from NRCan. Initially, this was to develop the Public Infrastructure Engineering Vulnerability Committee, which through this committee led development of the PIEVC protocol. The protocol itself was developed to assist engineers in factoring climate change impacts into plans for design, operation, maintenance, and adaptation of public infrastructure. So it's very much focused on that profession, although there's certainly increasing interest from other professions as well over the years. And it was specifically designed to be applied by professional teams. Typically, projects are managed by professional engineers, but climate scientists, climate experts, planners, risk managers, et cetera, large professional teams do become involved in application of the PIEVC protocol. And you'll see that if you have a chance to sort of review the existing assessments that are published on the website. And another thing that we wanted to highlight and that we're welcome to further discussion on in any respect is that the program remains independent as it was under Engineers Canada. As we'll describe later on, we've set up and are working to sort of grow an independent advisory committee to help guide the program going forward. Next slide, please. So a very quick note on ICLR. So we're going to quickly review some of the organizations that are involved here. Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, then I'll pass it over to Eric to review CRI. And later during Katrina's presentation, she'll give much more detail about GIZ specifically. So very briefly, ICLR, we are a disaster risk reduction institute. We were formed in 1997. Our mandate is to protect people and property from the impacts of extreme natural events. We're an independent nonprofit institute of Western University, and we were developed and supported in partnership with voluntary property and casualty insurance industry members. So a good part of our constituency includes the P&C insurance industry in Canada, but we're also very much involved in a wide range of academic and government projects concerning disaster risk reduction. And there's more, of course, on our organizations that available at our website. And I'll pass it over to Eric for an overview of CRI.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, so Climate Risk Institute, we're a not-for-profit academically affiliated organization in Canada. We work on advancing practice and delivering services, all focused on climate change assessment, adaptation planning, and resiliency. We also run a number of programs. PIEVC is one of those, and also programs on the training side of things, most notably down to the right, you'll see mention of the infrastructure resilience professional training and credentialing program. The 20 years of existence, that goes back to even precursors of the Ontario Centre for Climate Impacts and Adaptation Resources, or OCR. That organization was relaunched as the Climate Risk Institute about 3 years ago. And if you could just the next slide. So about 3 years ago, we had a small group of us, I think, and so happily I can say we have a more robust number of staff now, and ranging in expertise from engineering to natural sciences and social sciences, etc., and 2 interns as well. We also, if you can flip just to the next slide, please, work with a growing number of associates, and actually many of these folks have a role to play in the PIEVC program, often including on the training side, I should say. I think that's it for CRI at this point, Dan.
Great, thanks, Eric. And just a quick note, I meant to mention before, at a high level, the roles of the different organizations. So Iclr is by and large taking a lead role in the administration of the program. CRI leads with respect to technical aspects of the program in training, and Iclr and CRI are sort of the Canadian leads for the program. GIZ, as Katrina will highlight, is very much involved in international application of the program and specific PIEVC applications through their core program focused on infrastructure. And the Ontario First Nation Technical Services Corporation is involved. We're sort of referring to as an associate member, and that's related to their use of the PIEVC protocol and the First Nations Infrastructure Resilience Toolkit. And so we're happy to have them involved as well to help guide the program. So very quick overview of where of how the protocol has been applied to date. So this table is outlining at a very high level our known applications of the PIEVC protocol. And as you can see on the column on the left, it's been applied to a wide range of infrastructure. Most of these examples are Canadian examples, roughly just over 150 known examples to date across many infrastructure types, buildings, water, range of water infrastructure, transportation, all different types and elements of transportation infrastructure, including airports, coastal infrastructure and ports, utilities, First Nation Indigenous communities, and what we call other, but that includes large sort of screening applications of the protocol. And we say that these are the known applications. These are instances where users of the protocol went through sort of our formal request process for the PIEVC protocol. That includes signing our agreement to receive the protocol. Part of the agreement to receive the protocol is a commitment to submit a final report that could be shortened for publication on the website. To date, we've received just over 150 of those signed NDRAs as part of provision of the protocol. But we know through discussing with users of the protocol and many in the infrastructure buildings community that the PIEVC protocol is applied widely beyond these examples. At least dozens, if not hundreds of other applications. And we are working with our networks to ensure that we can bring these examples to light through forums like this, like webinars, and of course, publish whatever information we can on the website from these examples and others going forward. I'd also note within the last couple of years, the rate of application has increased quite significantly. So from 2008 to 2020, there were 92 official applications. And from 2020 to present, there were 59 NDRAs signed. Not all of those assessments are complete to date, but those are where the agreement with the program was signed, and we're aware of where the protocol is being applied. Next slide, please. And this table just highlights several of the international examples. I'm not going to go into detail. This is for Katerina once again, but it's just to highlight once again that not only is it being applied quite widely in Canada, there is a relatively significant application and increasing application internationally. You'll see the dates here of many of these programs are occurring within the last few years. Next slide, please. Another milestone, I suppose, I wanted to highlight is the high-level screening guide. So this guide was released in February 2021. Development of the guide was led by CRI and the CRI Associates. We also had an advisory committee involved in developing the high-level screening guide with a very iterative, a critical review process. Several of the organizations you can see if you access the high-level screening guide through the PIEVC.ca website. Similar to the protocol, this is freely available via the website. In the case of the high-level screening guide, we're kind of responding to user community requests to avoid the sort of administrative burden of signing the NDRA. In this case, we only ask that users complete registration form and then can access the high-level screening guide for free. Basically, a very high-level summary, the high-level screening guide facilitates use of the PIEVC process, but with a simpler presentation. It's meant to be used in screening or portfolio type applications, or for those who want sort of an expedited assessment method. For example, those who are applying to for climate lens funding, that sort of thing. This would facilitate maybe a desk-based, a shorter-term application of the PIEVC process. And in the high-level screening guide, scenarios where users might choose to use the high-level screening guide or full high-level PIEVC process are outlined. And development of the high-level screening guide is actually a direct response to those who are involved in submitting climate lens submissions, where the PIEVC protocol is identified as a vulnerability analysis method. And to date, as of today, we have well over 200 registered users and a few known applications of the high-level screening guide, which we'll actually get into in later webinars. Next slide, please. And very quickly, I think Katerina is going to go into a bit more detail about these new resources, but there's a number of new resources that will be coming out largely through support from GIZ and the work of CRI and Associates. And that includes the Portfolio Screening Manual, PIEVC Green, and soon to come out, PIEVC Family Resources Catalog, which is sort of a guide on resources available through the PIEVC program and how they relate to other climate vulnerability assessment resources that are available in the marketplace. Next slide, please. Very quick, a few examples. I mentioned earlier that the PIEVC process is increasingly being integrated into policy programs, guidelines. Here are just a few examples that have come up recently. One that I believe Harshan will be describing shortly, related to engineers, geoscientists, and BC MOTI application of PIEVC process for assessment of highway infrastructure in BC. It's a referred vulnerability assessment method in Infrastructure Canada's climate lens. It was referenced in the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment Best Practices for Vulnerability Assessment Guide. Pippa will be talking about the City of Calgary's use. It's also been applied in specific guidance documents and standards like CSA S900, which is a wastewater treatment plant climate change assessment standard, and as well as in other guidelines. And I mentioned the Ontario First Nations Technical Services Corporation's application of the guide earlier. Next slide, please. So with respect to next steps, this is also something that we'll be highlighting in future webinars. We're seeing in the program increasing demand and, in fact, requirements from infrastructure owners for vulnerability assessment, both at the local, national, international level. We're also hearing from the community preferences for open access, transparent, and flexible guidance, such as that's offered through the PIEVC program. We're also seeing on the horizon increasing policy and significant investments in climate change resilience, both in Canada and international context. And also already we're seeing that the PIEVC process is embedded locally, nationally, internationally, and even increasingly in private sector, specifically in the consulting sector that gets involved in vulnerability assessment. And so we're seeing a potential for growth of the program, and we very much welcome the input of the community going forward. We also wanted to highlight that the PIEVC program is more than just resources and services. It's a public good. It's meant to be offered for the public good in Canada and internationally. We intend to facilitate that going forward. It's an alliance, core alliance of organizations, of course, but also with the stakeholders and users of the PIEVC process. It's increasingly a well-known brand, which offers opportunities to release new resources where people can sort of understand where they fit into the overall ecosystem of climate change adaptation. There's a huge amount of goodwill associated with the program, and that's reflected in the volunteer hours that have been attributed to the program over the years. And as mentioned earlier, there's a huge stakeholder community, I think, reflected in the attendance today. Next slide, please. And that being said, so we do intend to move forward with growing the program and exploring opportunities of where the PIEVC program can contribute more meaningfully, and to facilitate that, two major sort of developments on the administrative side. One is the development of the PIEVC Program Advisory Committee, which is meant to provide strategic guidance, oversight, critical review of products, and expand awareness of the PIEVC program, and to facilitate continued and meaningful engagement with a large cross-section of users, communities, and sectors and geographies involved in the PIEVC program who are interested in the PIEVC program. And our first meeting of the advisory committee will be occurring on September 14th, and please let us know if you're interested in more information. And also, we'll be moving ahead with a more fulsome PIEVC program strategy, with the primary intent to help the program respond to user community requests. So we've had many meetings with stakeholders over the past couple of years, and a number of specific elements that people would like to see come from the program have been highlighted. That includes a continuous updating of the PIEVC process, facilitating risk treatment through the PIEVC process, support for small and under-resourced communities, user-friendly web-based resources, sustained outreach to the infrastructure and buildings communities through conferences and technical committees and that sort of thing, and also incorporating new elements to the PIEVC process, like better understanding of social implications of climate-related infrastructure disruptions. In order to facilitate our response to those user community requests, we are developing a strategy which we hope to release more widely and get user feedback on over the coming weeks and months. So I'll end my contribution there, and I'll pass it back to Eric.
Thanks, and it is very brief. Actually, we should perhaps have had this up with the new guidance docs, but another kind of product or service that is supporting use of PIEVC is a full 12-hour online kind of hybrid synchronous asynchronous PIEVC protocol course. It's shown here down in the right-hand corner of the honeycomb, and it's there because it comprises one of the 6 that make up the broader infrastructure resilience professional program. But specifically, this course is very much tied in, of course, to the PIEVC program more broadly. And there's a link down at the bottom if there's interest. Dan, can you please move to the next slide? Or sorry, not Dan, but yeah, thank you. I'm thinking about pausing for a second. We were going to go all the way, Katrina, through yours first, but I think there was a lot of information there and a number of questions that have come in that are quite specific, Dan, to some of the things you were talking about. So I'll put those forward for you to respond to, if that's okay. The first is the plan to maintain the requirement for PIEVC protocol users to publish report, or might this requirement be relaxed in the future?
Well, we really like we've always supported the concept of publishing PIEVC assessment reports. And that's always been one of the sort of primary public goods of the program is to get this information out into the public. It facilitates additional assessments. It sort of provides information to the community about who is doing assessments, what kind of findings our coming of assessments. And it also helps us within the program. For example, we developed an analysis utility, and part of the request from the user community is better understanding common outcomes, common data sources of PIEVC assessments. So we really would like to facilitate publication of assessment reports wherever possible. We do understand, and reflected, I think, even in the website content, there are situations where there are reports where information needs to be confidential, and we are working to accommodate that. So, for example, we have like a template of simple reporting where detailed reporting cannot be done. But wherever possible, we do want to get information out into the public. And whether that will always be full assessment report publications, I think that is somewhat determined based on the advisory committee input in the user community. As I said before, we'd like to facilitate that, but other options, and I think what we're trying to get to with the high-level screening guide is just build the community and provide forums like this one to get information out into the community through presentations and that sort of thing. So at the very least, we're tracking users, and we'll be going back to them and providing opportunities to share information on their assessment outcomes and findings and that sort of thing. But wherever possible, we do like to facilitate full publication. And I think many users actually like that. I think consulting companies, for example, like to get their information out into the public wherever possible, to show their capacities and that sort of thing.
Dan, just one further follow-up question, and if you can just give a quick answer, because we're running a little over. And this came in after the description of level screening guide and the other manuals that are being developed, so the large portfolio and PIEVC Green. And the question is this integration formal, or does it speak to the PIEVC aligning with these listed guidelines? So is the formal relationship between the guidelines and the overall PIEVC protocol?
Yeah, so I would invite Eric your comments and Katarina's comments as well. But these, I would say, are formal guides within the PIEVC program, and meant to somewhat similar to the high-level screening guide, meant to increase the applicability of the PIEVC process. Through packaging, through additional sort of contextual information that facilitates its application. So it's very much reliant on the PIEVC process, and I would say is a formal part of the program.
All right, thanks very much. I think we leave it at that for now. And with that, move on to Katrina's contribution.
Thank you. Yes. First of all, also from my side, a big thank you to Claire and Eric for setting this up today, this webinar. And thanks to all the participants. I'm really happy to see how many people have turned up today. We thought that for now, it would be good that I could give you a quick introduction to who GIZ is, and also what the CSI project that has been referred to multiple times now does, and also talking a bit about the vision for the international application of the PIEVC in the future. So I'm Katharina Lotzen. I work for the project Enhancing Climate Services for Infrastructure Investments at GIZ, and we are implementing this project on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action as part of the International Climate Initiative. So next slide, please. And maybe let's skip this slide as well. So just very briefly, because I know we also have a large audience from Canada who GIZ is, to be able to understand how we work as an organization. Basically what we do, we are a service provider that's implementing international cooperation for sustainable development for the German government in the majority of cases. We also explain it as we support change for Germany around the world. We do a lot of work in the area of promoting international education work and human capacity development, but also have a much broader understanding of capacity development in general. And we work in many different fields and sectors in the field of international development. We are public benefit federal enterprise, meaning we are fully owned by the German government, by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the German Ministry of Finance are our only stakeholders. And of course, this being our background, we are bound by German and European values in all that we do. The majority of our work is public benefit, but we also have a small taxable business area called GIZ International Services. Next slide, please. Currently, we have about 1,600 ongoing projects. We work in about 120 countries, and we have like about 25,000 employees, but the majority of our staff works in the countries or lives in the countries that we work in. So they are local to those countries. Next slide, please. Explaining a bit what we do. So the majority of our work is providing advisory services to our partners and doing project implementation, always on behalf of our commissioning parties. For this, we have our own management model. It is called Capacity Works, that we use for international capacity development. And basically, the difference to traditional management models is that our management model doesn't focus on a single organization, but focuses on a whole cooperation system that includes a large group of stakeholders. A big strength of us in this case is doing networking, dialogue, and mediation between these actors, including in very difficult and sensitive settings. And of course, like being active in 120 countries also gives us the unique ability to manage these projects and do the logistics, procurement, assignment of experts in all of these different countries. With that, please to the next slide. I want to turn to one of these 1,600 projects that we are implementing and that I'm working in, which is the CSI project. Next slide, please. So what do we do with CSI? Basically, our main objective is to support our partners to make their infrastructure more resilient and to make your infrastructure resilient and to make climate risk informed decisions about infrastructure. You need climate risk assessments. And this is where the PIEVC protocol comes in, because we chose PIEVC as the methodology on which we are building the capacities of our partners in the countries. But also from information, we are working on the side of climate services, because we realize that a big challenge for applying tools like the PIEVC is to have the information to go along with it. And what we mainly work on is to facilitate the dialogue between those that are providing these services and those that are using them. Basically, you often have a case of lost in translation here, no? Where the engineer doesn't understand the climatologist and vice versa. And we're trying to smoothen this process. And also a lot of the work we do relates to the infrastructure investment framework. We saw in Dan's presentation some examples from Canada, how you can create an enabling environment that the PIEVC can truly be implemented, and also to set all of this into the context of the national adaptation plans and policies of the countries, because tools like the PIEVC are really an opportunity to put those policies into action. Next slide, please. So we work with Costa Rica, Brazil, Vietnam, and with the Nile Basin, with the Nile Basin Initiative. We, of course, as GIZ, as we are have been working in all of these countries before, we were able to draw on a large network of existing partnerships, but the PIEVC also allowed us to broaden this perspective and to bring all of these different actors together, bringing together Ministry of Environment, infrastructure actors, and the hydromet services and other climate service providers in these countries. Next slide, please. And this is really like one of the reasons why, as GIZ, we really like the PIEVC methodology, and we took it up because of its participatory nature, because it brings together all of these different actors, which is really in line with our approach of creating capacities at the local level, and also using this local knowledge, especially in some contexts where you have big data gaps. This can really help you, and it's a really adaptable methodology. And also, I think what we are experiencing now is that we no longer have like this simple logic of, okay, this knowledge and technology flowing from Canada into our partner countries, but really in our partner countries, new innovations of the PIEVC are being created, new experiences are being created that now flow back into the larger PIEVC community and now into the practitioners network, which is one reason we wanted this network to exist, so we can have this exchange in a more formal manner. Please to the next slide and skip this one, please. Yes. So this explained a bit like the outlook. So what we as GIZ see, how can we go on with the PIEVC, and how can we ensure that also on the international level, we can make this accessible to those seeking for solutions in the field of climate risk assessments for infrastructure. I think one big cornerstone will be the practitioners network, because this will really make it easier to get access to expertise on the PIEVC and to work further on the tools and get access to capacity development. But of course, we want to pair this with our core strengths as GIZ, which is advisory on the institutional frameworks and on establishing these interagency partnerships that you need to successfully implement the PIEVC. Next slide, please. So we hope that we can take this on. We can use the experience we made as CSI project together with CRI and Iclr and our other partners, and support other decision makers, infrastructure decision makers in other countries around the world. We are already seeing success, other countries like Lesotho taking up the solutions, trainings we give in other countries like Indonesia. So we really hope this can grow and we can have a bigger international PIEVC family, including with the practitioners network. Next slide, please. Now I want to share some examples of what came out of this international arm, let's say, this international part of the PIEVC. I think Dan has already shown this to you, like the new versions of the PIEVC, which I also see as, let's say, like standalone. Like the PIEVC catalog is aimed at guiding somebody that wants to use the PIEVC to do a climate risk assessment in which of these methodologies to use, and then each of these guides is a standalone thing you can use to apply the PIEVC for your context. One of them is the portfolio screening, which now makes it easier to apply the PIEVC for whole infrastructure portfolios. In the webinar in December, we're going to hear from Brazil about their application in the port sector. So stay tuned if you want to learn more about the portfolio screening manual in this case. Also, we are currently working on the PIEVC Green because we saw more the need to have be able to apply the PIEVC in this interface between gray infrastructures and green infrastructures at the same time, which will be hopefully finalized by the end of the year. And we will have a specific webinar on the PIEVC Green next year in February to then share this final product. But we are also hoping to get some inputs through the practitioners network for this new methodology. Next slide, please. Also, we have one big success with our implementation in Vietnam of the PIEVC, where we could really achieve that the PIEVC was leading from the assessment to action. And I think this is still a challenge with the PIEVC in some cases, that the recommendations are implemented. We will cover this in depth in the next webinar in September. But just briefly, what happened in Vietnam is we worked with our partners with a sluice gate system, the biggest one in Vietnam. When we started, we were in the early design stage, and then we applied the PIEVC and used the recommendations to change the design. And really, these are, you see here the recommendations that we took up for the final design of the sluice gate, which is now already built in the Mekong Delta. Next slide, please. And another very big success that we are having with, as I hinted earlier, this is no longer only expertise from Canada being applied in the countries, but also we more and more are creating expertise in our partner countries, and then they working together. One example is our cooperation with the Nile Basin Initiative. Now together with Lesotho, some of the experts from the Nile Basin Initiative together with CRI are applying the PIEVC there. So we have this kind of regional knowledge transfer. Also same in Vietnam, we applied the PIEVC in the Mekong Delta, as you just saw. And now the partners that worked in this case study are working with decision makers from other provinces in Vietnam to share about the PIEVC, to share their knowledge. And also we are going, I don't have it on the slides, but very soon we are going to hear from Vladimir from the case study of Costa Rica, where Costa Rica also has worked closely with Brazil, but also I think in general, you can really see Costa Rica as, I would say, one of the biggest PIEVC nations now besides Canada, and one of the, speaking not only from a project perspective, but from a professional perspective, one of the better moments in my professional career, or highlights of my professional career, to work with Costa Rica on this case. So next slide, please. I could talk a lot about more what we did and all the other successes we had, but I want to leave it at that. And I'm really looking forward to this webinar series and exchanging with all of you and learning from all your experiences, and looking into all these different cases that I just got to very shortly touch upon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Katrina. That was great. And we're running enough over that I'd like to suggest that instead of taking questions now, we let people ruminate a bit on what you've said, and we can bring you back together with the panel. If people would like to pose questions in the chat between now and the end of the panel discussion. So with that, if we could advance, please, one more slide. So I'm really pleased again to be able to introduce our panelists, and I think what we'll do is I'll provide Pip's bio because she's about to speak, and then once Vladimir is up, we'll go to his. So I'd like pleased to introduce Pippa Cookson-Hills, who is a climate adaptation specialist working for the City of Calgary on the climate adaptation team. And Pippa manages the public infrastructure climate risk and resilience assessments and houses and facilitates the use of the city's climate projections and climate trends information. And she's going to give us a few minutes on her role at the city and the place of PIEVC within that. So on to you, Pippa, thanks.
Great, thanks so much, Eric, appreciate it. So I'm Pippa Cookson-Hills. As Eric mentioned, I work for the City of Calgary as a climate adaptation specialist on the climate adaptation team. And if you're not familiar with Calgary, I know that there are a lot of people on this call from all over the world. It's a city that's nestled just east of the Rocky Mountains in the province of Alberta in Canada. We are the 4th largest city in Canada with a population of 1.3 million people. And Calgary is no stranger to severe weather. We are part of Tornado Alley in Canada. We have more than our fair share of significant hailstorms. And the city has 2 rivers running through it, so it has experienced several significant floods in the recent past. So we've seen also that the frequency and intensity of these events are increasing, and so we want to be able to better prepare our infrastructure in a changing climate. And as part of this preparation, part of my work at the city is also to manage the climate risk and resilience assessments for public infrastructure projects. And for these assessments, we have developed and by our, I mean the climate adaptation team here at the City of Calgary, our own process that combines the PIEVC protocol with the climate lens guidance. And this is a process that our team has been piloting and evolving over the last couple of years. We've done pilots for projects for buildings, Main Street projects, a roadway interchange, water projects, transit, and we estimate climate risks to different infrastructure assets on these projects. So, and I know many of you are familiar with the process from the polls, but I'm going to walk through it from a Calgary perspective and how we use these results to help design infrastructure in a more resilient manner. So the overall goal for the city is to understand climate risk to a project. And so we ask that projects over a certain dollar threshold undergo these assessments to reduce climate risk. And by climate risk, this really means looking at the exposure to climate hazards, the likelihoods of hazards occurring, and the consequences should it occur or should they occur. And so we bring on consultants through a pre-qualified list to do this type of work, and we have 4 that we rotate through. And the consultant then engages with me and the design team, the project team, throughout the project to assess climate risk, hosting workshops to engage properly with all the team players. And then they also produce a report at the end with the highest risks and the associated resilience recommendations prioritized to reduce that risk to different infrastructure assets. And so once this process is complete, I submit this report to PIEVC to be added to their online database. I know that there was a question on this earlier, and I'm a huge supporter of this. It has really helped the city better understand different impacts and also resilience recommendations that other cities are going through as well. So I also want to add, once this report is complete, I then follow up with the project team regularly so I get a better understanding of the status of implementation and how we can then continue, or how I can continue to support the team to integrate resiliency into design. And so some of the lessons learned so far from these assessments is really get the right people involved. This is especially the case in the workshops. You can miss entire concepts if you don't have the right people involved, and this really does take good communication skills on all sides of the project to figure out who those people are. And then start the conversations early with business units at concepts so that they do have an idea of what's to come. and how this kind of ties into them in terms of a budget perspective as well, and not just from the cost of the assessment, but also from the cost of the resilience recommendations and what these costs can be as well. Otherwise, it could be really hard to implement. And I've also been learning that were some of the gaps in both our team at the city and consultant teams as well. So our team does need to build our team a little bit more internally so we can have someone bridge that gap between climate adaptation specifically and then the engineering side. So really taking the recommendations provided to us and then making them more specific. And so then another learning of the project is also project teams are more likely to consider project risk if it is a requirement as per city policy. So that's something that the city is working on as well, incorporating climate adaptation into policy. And also cost benefit analyses we're learning are really hard to do for these projects. And while this can be great for project teams to have to encourage the implementation of these resilience recommendations, they're just really difficult to perform. And so we're finding that that we need to build out some internal capacity for this work as well. And we're also finding that the recommendations is something that Katerina touched on, the recommendations from implementation, the recommendation to implementation can be difficult. And I think part of that too is that some of the recommendations we have been receiving are quite general. So next year, I'll be updating the city process as well to make it a little bit more specific and incorporate more of the high-level screening guide approach. But that's another learning too, is that the process that we've developed at the city is sort of ever evolving and needs to be updated, at least in the beginning, to incorporate these lessons learned. And then finally, no one really reads 50-page reports, so developing a 2-page summary has been really helpful for our project teams to just get the Cole's notes of what's going on and incorporate that into implementation. And one more thought is also, I also provide the likelihoods to the consultants when we bring them on board. And by doing this, I give them the climate profile and the likelihoods, and then the consultant can then really focus on the meat of the problem, which is providing resilience recommendations to reduce climate risk. And in doing this, it helps our budget. It also helps standardize the project a little bit so that the consultant can, again, like I said, focus on the really important part of the problem, what we're interested in from the city of Calgary. And next slide. So these are just some photos from some of our assessments. I don't really have anything more to add. It's just that if you want to contact me, there's my email there. We recently put out the climate projections for Calgary report earlier this year. So if you want to delve into what we're expecting in a changing climate, please feel free. We also have just had our climate strategy approved by council earlier in July. That was very exciting. So if you want to read into that a little bit more, there are some resources that we can provide.
Pippa, thanks very much for so much richness in so little time. And folks, we will be getting, I think we had mentioned, we'll be posting the slides and the video so you can go back to some of this. And questions for Pippa, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll take up once we've gone through, once the next two panelists have spoken. And so next, if we can forward to the slides for Vladimir. So Vladimir Naranjo Castillo is a civil engineer in Costa Rica with a degree from the University of Costa Rica. Vladimir also has a master's degree in business administration with an emphasis on finance from the Costa Rican Institute of Technology and project management specialist qualifications from Leeds University. He has over 14 years of professional experience and is the manager of the Climate Change Unit of the National Organization of Engineering and Architecture of Costa Rica. Vladimir has worked as a senior project manager on a variety of projects, including climate risk assessment using the PIEVC protocol, and he has participated in different risk analyses for infrastructure projects facing climate change impacts in countries ranging from Costa Rica to Brazil, Peru, and Canada, including aqueducts, bridges, transmission lines, ports, and mines. He has also trained both professional teams and community teams. With that, I hand it over to Vladimir. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I will share some of the experience that we have had in Costa Rica regarding PIEVC protocol. The first thing that I would like to say is that we applied the PIEVC protocol for the first time between 2010 and 2012. It was the wastewater. If you can you click, please? If the first one was a wastewater system in the city of Limon between 2010 and 2012. And then we have experience with LaGuardia Bridge as well, which was in between 2018 and 2020. And then we have also an experience with Nimble Aquifer and 14 coastal aqueducts in the region of Santa Cruz in Guanacaste. It was a very complex project because of the size of the projects and of the organization that were there, but it was a very good experience, and I will talk a little bit more in the next slide, please. Regarding adaptation to climate change in Nimble Aquifer, well, we in the region of Guanacaste experienced a severe drought between 2013 and 2014. It causes a desalinization of two very important wells, and then the next year in 2015 and 2016 experienced very severe floods. So they decided would have the opportunity to apply PIEVC protocol for that project in order to ensure the sustainability of the provision of services and maximize the benefits of the populations. Next slide, please. Then we have the opportunity, as Katharina was saying, to work with the Climate Services for Infrastructure Investments project, CSI project. It was a very interesting project because it was the first time that our Ministry of Transportation and Civil Works applied CRA methodology. So they had a decision to make regarding if they were going to apply a bridge retrofit or even construct a new bridge. And then we support through the application of PIEVC protocol the decision to a bridge retrofit, which was the final decision. And they used the PIEVC protocol report, the final report, to decide regarding that. Next, please. Okay, some of the PIEVC lessons that we learned. I think people talk about some of them, but the first thing that I would like to say is that some of the PIEVC users think that the very first user think that they are going to find all the answers in the document and in the methodology, and it's not like that. And I mean, for example, when we were in the first application, some of the people were expecting like detailed design solution, and PIEVC protocol is not that. I mean, you could use PIEVC protocol, PIEVC reports to work in the solutions, but you have to learn that you have to use the PIEVC reports to build the solutions as CRA assessments. That's the main component of that. The second thing is that, and it happened as with Nimble experience, is that some of the operation and maintenance budget could be invested in low-risk interactions instead of high-risk interactions. In the case of them, they didn't have like technical criteria for making decision processes, and then they, with the report, with the PIEVC process, they discovered that they were investing this, they were wasting their money, and they changed like using the PIEVC reports to work on planning budgets, and they helped them a lot. Another thing that I would like to say, and this is very important for us, is that local knowledge is often underestimated, and in my opinion, it is crucial in this kind of studies. If the team play a very important role regarding that, because people say something about get the people involved, and it is just like that. You have to get the people involved if you want to succeed in the application of the project. Something that is also very important for us is that you have to make the best decision you can with the best information you have. We have some limitations regarding climate services here in Costa Rica, but we have learned that if you have information, you could use that information and convert data to useful information to make and support decision processes. I know that uncertainty is going to be there, but it doesn't have to be like to promote an inaction. And last but not least is that climate risk assessment methodologies don't need to be extremely complex. And I think that PIEVC is a very good example of that. We have applied successfully PIEVC protocol with very good results. And we have the help of wonderful teams with communities involved and great professional staff working on the solution. And I think at the end of the road, that's precisely what we are looking for. Next, please. So we decided to move from PIEVC to use to use PIEVC for a tropicalized version of it. And you will be wondering why. And the thing is that different experiences that we have and what some feedback of communities and local governments and different government institutions that were involved in the process gave us some kind of feedback regarding like the modifications that we developed during the sessions that we have. So they want kind of standardized or shared with other government institutions that. So we decided to move to a tropicalized version of PIEVC, which is MERS-CCR. So for that, we create a leading group, which was with the Ministry of Environment, our Ministry of Civil Works and Transportation. We have also our National Institution of Meteorology, and with the support of GIZ, our organization, CEFIA, helped the group to create this version. And then we have like an expanded group. We integrate the academia and other institutions and potential users of MERS-CCR and use that the core of PIEVC to develop a tropicalized version and integrate some of the modifications we were working on. Next, please. So where are we now? We are going to publish MERS-CCR next September. And we are like looking for 2 or 3 possible candidates for the pilot study. We are starting a planning process for a course to share the experience and to share the methodology, which by the way, we are planning with the help of CRA, the support of CRA. We are working with our Ministry of Environment and other organizations looking for application opportunities as well. And CEFIA, in this case, our role, well, we want the continuity and the sustainability of the process. So because of that, we received like the support of our board. And since February 2022, we have a climate change unit here. We are going to work supporting the creation of capabilities, and not only in Costa Rica, but in the region as well. We will continue supporting and advising government institutions and communities regarding CRA, and we will keep the knowledge growing. That I mean, we want to keep the knowledge and the experiences growing, and then sharing it. I think at the end of the road, that's the idea that we have regarding not only our PIEVC previous experience, but MERS as well. Next, please. Well, that's all that I have. I want to thank again for the opportunity to be here, and we'll be happy to share more details about that. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. And interesting to see both in the Calgary and Costa Rica context that some inspiration taken from PIEVC, and in Costa Rica, the tropicalization, and in Calgary, not quite the tropicalization, I don't think, but also an adaptation. With that, I'd like to move to the next slide, please, and to introduce Harshan Radhakrishnan, PEng and Manager of Climate Change and Sustainability Initiatives with Engineers and Geoscientists BC. where he does a number of things, including management of programs and initiatives that help address sustainability and climate change adaptation and mitigation in the practice profession. Harshan provides staff support for engineers and geoscientists BC's climate change and sustainability advisory groups, and he plays a key role in supporting implementation of engineers and geoscientists BC's climate change action plan. Harshan also conducts outreach to provincial and municipal governments, technical groups, and others in relation to climate change and sustainability strategies. He's a professional engineer registered in both Columbia and Alberta, and has over 10 years of experience in environmental regulation, oversight of regulatory programs, as well as an in-depth understanding of municipal, provincial, and federal regulatory requirements. So with that, over to you, Harshan.
Thank you, Eric, for that kind introduction. Glad to be here. And before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you all today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, on whose territories Engineers and Geoscientists BC offices are located in. For those that do not know, Engineers and Geoscientists BC is the provincial regulatory body for engineers and geoscientists in BC, and we have about more than 40,000 engineers and registrants, engineers and geoscientists that are working in BC. Our mandate is first and foremost to protect the public interest respecting the practice of professions. How we deliver on the mandate is by establishing, monitoring, and enforcing standards for professional practice. And we also have the duty to respond to demand-side legislation, number of required approaches suggested by local, regional, provincial, all the way to the federal government. And the way we do that is through the development of professional practice guidelines. I'll give you one example of the kind of demand-side legislation that we work collaboratively to support engineering practice. That is BC Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure's technical circular. What this did was it provided a directive for engineers to consider design adaptation to climate change and extreme weather events. And it actually required engineers to show their work through filling out a design criteria sheet. And in terms of a suggested approach, they stated that you have to use risk-based approaches and you have to use climate information. And with that information, we work collaboratively with Engineers Canada, who had at that time applied PIEVC protocol collaboratively with BC MOTI on a number of highway stretches in the province of BC. So we had a lot of information and experience that came out of these assessments, and number of engineers and geoscientists contributing to these assessments. And so we had the critical mass to be able to develop a set of professional practice guidelines that kind of offered what the duties and obligations are for registrants that are working to provide these services. Just beyond that, I'd just like to mention that it's not just BC MOTI. There are starting to be regulatory, market, and financial drivers to consider climate change. All the way from the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions to, the climate lens assessments by Infrastructure Canada. We could even look at the federal government that just came up with a contaminated sites action plan, which means that environmental professionals that work on contaminated projects, contaminated sites, they'll have to do risk assessments to work on federal projects. And we have a lot of information coming out that risk-based approaches can help translate climate change into engineering decisions. And this is something that is familiar for registrants and infrastructure professionals. because risk-based approaches can lend themselves to address sort of the systems-wide and enterprise-level risks, which include but are not limited to climate change. So these risk-based approaches are, they kind of fill the gap where sort of the performance-based approaches that are evolving in the codes and standards, as well as, let's say, the other kind of approaches to address risk and resilience are evolving. These risk-based and risk-informed approaches can nicely fill that gap. And there's a lot of training information available for us to really upskill ourselves and mainstream the provision of climate risk management services. So I'll quickly touch on some of the lessons learned through the development of these, practice guidelines and, the number of case studies that have been included, but also based on the lived experience. In BC, just like in Calgary, we had, series of heat waves and atmospheric river type events. And that forced us to look at some of the risk assessments that BC MOTI had already completed. And what we found out was that the potential for these sort of atmospheric river type events playing out was already captured in the risk assessments carried out by BC MOTI. So what this tells us is that there is a real utility in having these risk assessments carried out because they enable sort of looking at risks both from a top down, looking at what are the acute, chronic, and cascading risks, as well as the sort of the bottom-up approaches, looking at how we can envision some scenarios that will help drive, risk-based approaches to arriving at decisions. And they lend themselves to a multidisciplinary, collaborative approach to arriving at what are the risks that are important for multiple stakeholders that we can strategically address. And one of the things that came out, after the series of extreme weather events is that, it became quite evident that while some of these approaches have been used to design new infrastructure, we can be really strategic about addressing how we can assess risks in existing infrastructure and how we can be really strategic about arriving at effective adaptation options. While there are a plethora of options to address risks, multiple opportunities to boost resilience, these risk assessments will kind of drive the practitioners towards being extremely focused in terms of understanding, what are sort of the most important bottom lines that we are trying to address here, and how we can sort of address these uncertainties, how we can pick up and distinguish between signal and noise, and how we can be really strategic in terms of arriving at certain pinch points where we can devise effective adaptation solutions. So with that, I'd just like to go to the next slide and finish by stating that we have a great sort of partnership through the PIEVC Alliance, through the Climate Risk Net Institute that is able to offer a series of training opportunities for us to really upskill ourselves. From the engineers and geoscientists BC perspective, I'd like to think that we provide a supportive and collaborative role through the provision of the professional practice resources, some of which you can see in these slides. We also host a current and frequently updated climate change information portal. I've provided the link to that. And we'll continue to play our part in terms of making sure that our registrants have the knowledge, capacity, and insights to be able to provide services in climate risk management, and particularly in relation to resilience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harshan. Boy, we forced you guys to squeeze a lot into so little time. I assure people that in the upcoming webinars, the next of which is in a month, focused on actual adaptation implementation from stemming from PIEVC work, there will be much more time allotted to the experts and panelists. That having been said, I think we can squeeze in one question that we would hope to pose to all three panelists. If you keep your answer, well, put it this way, we have about 7 minutes left in the full session. But the question is this, what challenges or successes have you experienced with the PIEVC protocol, and how could that help inform the role and design of a practitioners network? And I could say not just the PIEVC protocol, but work in the climate risk area generally. And let's see, maybe let's begin in the same order. Pippa.
All right. So for us, the main success, I'm going to start with success. I'm an optimist, and what we've been seeing from these assessments is just the opportunity of having all of these people in a room who may not have had this conversation before, and really engaging folks across the organization to talk about climate adaptation. And that's what's been really valuable. And also hearing from different teams across the city and the recognition that that they think that these changes are possible. And so that's very valuable. And the more we have this conversation, the more we normalize climate adaptation across the teams and engineers, architects, planning, and all this alike. So this really builds capacity, grows expertise and accountability. So these processes spark this conversation. And speaking about having the right people in the room, also, we've been finding that having folks from operations and maintenance in the same room as the design and project teams have been really beneficial. That's been a really big eye-opener, and that's really helped to change design pretty effectively in moving forward as well. Saying this, though, this can also be a challenge. Again, if you do not include the right person in the conversation, then you can miss out on the feasibility of some of the implementation. And in terms of challenges, this is what I spoke to earlier, is really the implementation of these resilience recommendations. Some of the resilience recommendations that we've been receiving are very general. So trying to find a balance between climate science and engineering and straddling that line, and building capacity both internally and externally could be something that the network could possibly work on expanding, and perhaps that's done through additional training. I'm not sure if the IRP program is possible to be expanded to non-engineers, but that could be something that could potentially be very beneficial as well. And I've got other ones, but I know our time is short, so I'm going to just put a few more in the chat, and then I'll let the others speak.
Thank you very much. I was right to the point. So the mixing of people who typically hang out in different clubs, as it were, potentially also being helped by practitioners network, and then focusing on actual adaptation implementation. Vladimir, over to you, please.
Well, in our cases, we have experiences both challenges and successes. Regarding challenges, one of the things that I want to point out is the lack of climate services for its use in climate risk assessment that we have here in Costa Rica. And I would say in Central America region as well, you don't have like a wide offer of companies or government institutions offering tailored products to use in this kind of assessment. So well, I have had the opportunity to participate in some PIEVC applications in Canada, and I know that this wouldn't be a problem for you, but here is kind of different. But as I said during my intervention is we have to use the best information we have and make the best decision we can at the time. And we precisely do that. And we use, like, we built a very strong teams with great professionals and get the people involved from the communities. Something that people say that you have to learn how to communicate with people that are not engineers and use like a language that they will understand. So I would say that one of the success as well, and it was precisely with the project of Nimble, was that the rural organizations realized during the PIEVC application that, as I said, they were wasting their budgets and their limited resources in reactive measures that maybe they were going to lose the next extreme event. So they used the PIEVC report not only to adapt their infrastructure, but they discovered that doing that as well, it helped them to save some money. For example, in the electricity bill. So having said that, I think that PIEVC Practitioners network will have like this component, this very important role to share experiences, to share contact, to share knowledge, and things like that. Things like this webinar series is something that we will have to take advantage of that to potentiate the use of PIEVC protocol and sharing knowledge between all of us.
I'll quickly add that in BC, we have a lot of case studies, and we have multiple stakeholders who have contributed to a better understanding of what are the climate risks, not just with BC MOTI. The province of BC, they had completed a strategic assessment of climate change. At the local level, Metro Vancouver, which has a regional governance, mandate, they had, carried out the future projections of, their various member municipalities, how it's going to look like and what it means for infrastructure planning. So we have a lot to draw from. But there are challenges, for example, engineers and project managers, they're typically concerned about the, sort of the project management triangle. How do we do this within the allotted budget, timelines, and scope? And the other flip side is that the knowledge exists, but sometimes it could be a little bit where, experts kind of work in niche areas, and the information is not really mainstream yet. But we are working to address both those issues. The development of the high-level screening guide, for example, that can go a long way in terms of cutting down on the level of effort. We have the climate change advisory group here. We have numerous networks that practitioners can tap into. And I'm really excited about the PIEVC Alliance that really provides opportunity for a global community of practice for knowledge sharing, and that will really serve well to make sure these approaches are well understood, implemented, and mainstreamed.
Thank you so much to all three of you, and to respect the time, I just want to say we have at least one question that came from the audience for all three of you. We can't tackle it now. We have another question from us as well. Those questions will be posted in about a month's time when we're on to our new community practice or network IT infrastructure, which will be part of what we introduce next. So I'd like to proceed to closing and just say, please do, actually, sorry, if we can go back to the last couple slides, to please do join us next month for another webinar, again, as indicated, focusing on implementation of adaptation actions. We'll have practitioners speaking from Canada and one at least from Vietnam presenting on their work. Just to note that webinar will start at 9 a.m. Eastern time on account of to accommodate time zone issues with Vietnam. But all webinars are recorded, so you can always go and find it on the website afterwards if 9 a.m. Eastern is too early. And just also to say, we will welcome the new Practitioners Network platform next month. So next final slide, please. That's about all we have. Just want to thank everyone very much for joining us. A big special thank you, of course, to Pippa Pippa, Vladimir, and Harsham. If you have projects you'd like to highlight, bring to our attention for a potential presentation through this webinar series or otherwise, please let us know. Thanks again very much. We'll see you soon, and please use the SurveyMonkey survey if you're able. All right. Thanks all.